Hundreds of people took to the streets that night in honor of the rally. The Rom family has done many bad things. First tax evasion, then conspiracy. Even though they were royalty, they couldn't get away with treason. The people were not willing to let it all go. Hidden among the crowd was the protagonist of the story. How much she hated everything that was happening around her. Idiots. Idiots, brainless. Lazy people who wouldn't even be moved by a fire. I told you so many times that the first prince was nothing. I told you that bastard could never be a good ruler and prove himself as the crown prince. How many times have I said it? The angry girl thought to herself, back to Rom. The world tree on the coat of arms. A name synonymous with eternal prosperity. The family that propelled the first emperor to the throne. Therefore, it can be said without embellishment that the story of Rom is the story of the empire itself. It accumulated immense wealth through the influence of the war of art and culture. Rum all over the world has left its mark. The imperial family felt threatened by them, ordered the restriction of powers and lineage after Garrick Rom led it. However, Garrick immediately invented the grant system and, without separating aristocrats and commoners, nurtured excellent specialists. And these same specialists then touched all spheres of activity, occupying high positions. In the end, the previous emperor himself revoked their order. No matter how stupid you are, how could you dry up such a clan in just 2 years? The girl thought aloud. The reason for her anger was simple. She, too, had been a member of the Rom family for a while, the little girl who lived in South Korea and died in a car accident. That was her. Because of this, when she first opened her eyes in the body of a baby, she let out a delighted cry of joy that she was born with a golden spoon in her mouth. Except, she was wrong. Her father, Ruslan Rom, was the third son of the previous head of the family, but her mother, who passed away during childbirth, was a commoner. She was not recognized as an official bride. She, however, who was born to them, still received both her father's love and the surname Rom by permission of her grandfather. However, the little girl remained an illegitimate child and could not hope for anything more. After her father passed away a few days before her 11th birthday, she was gradually forgotten about, as there was no one else to take care of the girl. But she couldn't stay away forever. So when she turned 15, she started working for the clan herself. Her perseverance became her engine. Fortunately, her skills weren't too bad either. And just like that, she slowly gained more and more importance in the manor. From 18, she was already managing the Rom household. At 19, she was helping her grandfather with his duties when he fell ill. Her father's arrogant and incompetent brothers, cousins who were just plain trash. On a daily basis, she only owed but could not enjoy a single privilege. She'd be lying if she said she wasn't having a hard time. What a pity, a terrible pity. If I had only known a little earlier that I had someone so sweet, I would have bequeathed our lineage to you. Her grandfather told her that day, but the protagonist still continued to say that she was just an underachiever. How could I, born of a commoner, lead a clan? With a smile on her face, but with longing in her heart, the girl said, "Stop it, Sophia, aren't you Rom? I, Garrick, speak with full confidence. You have every right to do so." From the last strength uttered the man. He continued to apologize to the now-grown child as well. "I'm sorry. I should have been more attentive to you when you were a baby. You are my granddaughter, too, after all. Please forgive me." Those were his last words. And Sophia only had enough of these words. She had put so much effort into this house because she really loved Rom very much. However, the cruel brothers kicked the girl away from the house. One of them gathered all her belongings and ordered her to get out of here immediately. "Tease, I only tolerated you because of your father, but my patience has broken. A bastard daughter. You think the hell of yourself. Know your place," the man said sternly then. Sophia, on the other hand, tried to persuade him otherwise in every way she could. "I'm begging you. I would like to stay Rom. Let me work for the sake of the clan," she pleaded, almost on her knees. She thought she was needed here, but the guy clearly didn't think so. He argued that she certainly didn't know her place. "Don't you dare even come near our house!" With those words, she was shoved to the doorstep. The girl was just thrown out, not even allowed to exercise the right of inheritance she was entitled to as a rod. And in exactly 2 years, these weaklings have dried up the Roms. This great clan, the beautiful House of Rum, to which she devoted her youth. Now all the girl did now was go to bars, drinking beer to dull her pain. She was already so saddened by everything that had happened that she was even beginning to think that she would have been better off supporting the other prince. It only takes 2 eyes on your head to realize that. The second prince is 100 times more suitable for the role of emperor than the first prince, who only spent his time gambling and love games. The drunken lady reasoned. The second prince, Furbrieve Dew, a genius who was despised because he was born a maid, but once he entered the academy, he immediately asserted himself as an outstanding individual. He was the top student in both the humanities and military disciplines of the Imperial Academy. His political power was unrivaled. The parliament of aristocrats who were former followers of the Empress fully supported him. The foolish Rom followed the first prince and descended into foul plots against the second prince. Now that the second prince had been granted the title of crown prince and the emperor had fallen into a coma, they felt the full measure of payback for their misdeeds. And so, when the protagonist was fleeing from that bar because she had no money to pay, suddenly the silhouette of a large horse appeared in front of her. Without noticing how, she found herself on the floor. Her limbs were beginning to go numb. The girl realized that she was dying. At the same time, how stupid it all came out. In her previous life, she died in an accident. In this one, she was run over by the crew. But as frustrating as it was, the moment she felt her life leaving her, her consciousness had already drifted away. And so the girl was able to open her eyes. But as soon as she woke up, she saw her father in front of her. She became a little girl again, who together with her father was reading a book. Sophia didn't understand at all what was happening. What is this? I was definitely hit by a carriage. Why am I suddenly in the library? And why is the chair so high? How many questions there were in the girl's mind at that moment, but how few answers there were. She didn't understand anything at all. There was only one thought in her mind at that moment. First, I need to get out of here, she thought. So, the girl asked her daddy for a long walk to her room. He offered his help to walk her out, but she immediately refused. "No, I can go by myself. I'll be back soon," said the girl, and immediately disappeared from sight. But as the reborn ran to another room, she noticed the way the books in the library were arranged. It was a classification that had been used before she had changed everything. And as far as Sophia remembered, there should be a guest room next to the library. That's how it turned out. The girl rushed over there. She had originally intended to go to that room, as she knew it was supposed to have a mirror in it. But as soon as Sophia saw her reflection, she wondered, "Why am I so small?" Scared the reborn. "And why is my body so weak? I've barely run a couple of meters, but I'm already panting." She continued to disbelieve her eyes. Then the girl began to speculate how old she could be. She remembered that she had fallen and earned a scar when she was 8. So the girl lifted her skirt to look at her knee. No scar appeared. Now, she was completely unaware of how old she could be. How much it frightened Sophia, but also made this rebirth and return fun at the same time. When she looked out the window, she noticed the greenery around her. All of these trees had been cut down when Vin took over the clan. The saplings of these trees had been sent by the first emperor in honor of the completion of the Rom estate. Vin, the eldest son of the clan, cut them all down. The younger uncle, Lawrence, was groveling before Vin, so he didn't object. They were all the same. The girl knew her father was young and weak in health, but he was so smart that everyone at the academy envied him. If only her father hadn't died so early, things might have turned out differently. But just when the girl thought about the saddest event in her life, she also realized something. Wait a second. My father passed away from an illness before my 11th birthday. The cure was invented a few years later. Realized the protagonist. This meant that Sophia had a chance to save her dad. Dad would be able to keep from getting sick, and then everything would be different. It sounds like something impossible, but after all, the girl returned to the past and keeps in her head all the necessary knowledge. And in that case, there is. She should be able to protect it, as well as the Rom clan. That should have been her goal now. Sad memories popped up before her eyes in bright flashes. But the little girl tried to reassure herself that it hadn't happened yet. First, she needed to stop Vin from becoming the head of the clan. Vin's wife, Sarah, and the first prince's mother, Empress Lexi Agnia, are cousins. That's why Vin supported the first prince, putting away his shrewdness, with which he could realize that the first prince was not suitable for the role of crown prince, in second place. Definitely not Vin. Someone else is needed. Someone to support the second prince. The little girl thought logically. Then her grandfather's last words popped into the reborn's mind. If only I had known a little earlier that I had someone so skillful, I would have bequeathed our lineage to you. Her granddaughter remembered his words perfectly. The girl realized that she should give it a try. Now she would not make a mistake with her choice of side. The second prince could become the crowned prince. Why don't I work ahead of time and contact the second prince in advance? Thought the protagonist. And if I can find a use for everything I know 20 years ahead of time, it would definitely be a success. So Sophia decided to try it once. It wouldn't make things worse, would it? Now she can be a hostess. And for that, she needed her grandfather's trust. Mr. Garrick has been summoned by the head of the family and has gone to the study. The librarian informed the child when she asked where her grandfather was. It was Librarian Brahm. In her past life, the girl had started working at the library after Brahm had retired due to illness. Sophia had even heard that he was originally a famous professor in the academy. Grandpa, librarian, can you lend me one book? I want a book called People from the South. The little girl said to him then. The man thought that Mr. Garrick had asked her to borrow it, but the girl immediately started to deny it. The little girl suddenly said that she was the one who would read it. And that's when the little girl already came to her grandfather's office. She decided that she would not go inside and just wait for him near the window. How glad Sophia was to hold the story in her hands. At last! The book I most wanted to read after being kicked out of the clan! Rejoiced Fia. How she bit her elbows knowing that the book had been in the Kin's book depository all this time. Sophia had never been able to read it until she died, after all. And now she had the opportunity to read it from cover to cover. But her happiness was distracted by the boys who approached her. They were the older brothers. And the most obnoxious of them all was Vin. Because he was Ram's eldest grandson, he always had new girlfriends. And Aslan, who just spent the family's money gambling like it belonged to him alone. Real bastards. As soon as the girl saw the brothers, she immediately laughed involuntarily. Oops, that was a mistake. I couldn't help but laugh as soon as I saw them. They might have gotten mad. Immediately she thought and apologized. Of course the brothers were not willing to let it go unheeded. Who do you dare to laugh at, you filthy inferior? It was a hurtful nickname her cousins called her because of her mother being a commoner. Brother, it seems like this inferior has gotten angry. So what? They were also discussing amongst themselves. Yes, around this time, the protagonist, while still a child, was scared as hell of these two. Their bullying was too cruel and frequent for a small child to endure. Before, all she could do was cry and wet herself with fright. And when her father had resented it, Vin and Lawrence had only shamed him, saying that he took children's pranks too seriously. Then the girl realized that this was the perfect opportunity to find out how old she was now. Vin told her, without guessing anything, that she was now 7 years old. The girl, so as not to arouse suspicion or play dumb, said that she knew that very well. It was easy to calculate that Vin was 10 at that moment, and his brother Aslan was 8. Already so big, and you're still behaving so uncultured. You can't bully your cousin and call her inferior, the girl then stated. But this seemed to displease one of the brothers even more. He swung right at her. How dare the lowly creature stare at me like that? Ha 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 ha, great! Inferior, but you dare to lecture me? He continued to speak and punched the little girl. You seem to think you're our equal since we share the same last name. You're no Rom, he went on to say. Therefore, he demanded that the girl return to her commoner slum now. Since there was an adult girl in front of the guys who was in the body of a toddler, she knew exactly what she should do in such situations. Without thinking long, she retaliated by hitting one of the guys with her book. Vel is an ill-mannered puppy, a little puppy who yaps at a tiger. Today I'm going to wean you from that habit. And that was Sophia's goal. Their disagreement was so strong that it had already escalated into a fight. The children were acting rude and shouting and kept calling each other names. At that moment, someone came out of the grandfather's office. "What's all the commotion?" asked one of the men. How surprised the adults were when they saw the children fighting on the floor in front of them. It was Vel's father who panicked the most. The children immediately ran to their parents in tears to complain. The obnoxious father, the naughty child, immediately asked the girl to apologize to his son. "Will you calm down at last?" the head of the family said in a loud tone. The grandfather, at least for a second, was able to quiet the noise around him. Garak asked Aslan to tell him what happened here. My brother Vel and I were just walking along, and incomplete, oops, Sophia suddenly pounced on us. She kicked him with her foot. He fell right off. And then with a book and 1 and 2. Immediately, the child began to tell. And after all adults could believe in such nonsense, one could imagine how much the little girl was offended. To distort the facts in such a way, while the brothers themselves are to blame. How could one even believe such a thing? After the grandfather listened to the child carefully, he immediately addressed the brother directly. "Is that so? Sophia just started beating you and Vel for no reason?" asked the man. And then, of course, the children confirmed it. Vel even started to tell them that Sophia had always not hated them, but the grandfather was unwilling to listen to him. "Stay out of other people's conversations, Vel. Why don't you still know that standard of decency? Put the man in his place." Vel was really stupid after all. Grandpa hates most of all to pry into other people's dialogue. Then, too, Garak informed him that it was time for Sophia herself to speak up about the whole situation. If it were the old little girl, she would have avoided the stares. An illegitimate child, a crybaby with a huge amount of fear, such was the little one. But it was different now. The girl confidently declared that she was not guilty of anything. Then, too, the father of the unwed brother also interrupted the child, and he did it for nothing. Just now, before his eyes, his son made the same mistake. But he still, apple from the apple tree. And so, the girl was finally able to go on to tell how things really were. "I was only waiting here for Daddy." But suddenly, Vel and Aslan came in and started laughing at me, calling me inferior. I asked them not to do that, and they slapped me for it. The protagonist started narrating. She also confessed that it was Vel who hit her. "He called me a lowly creature, told me to get out to the slums where the commoners live," narrated Sophia. At that moment, of course, the girl was ashamed too. Above all, she felt embarrassed in front of her dad. "I'm sorry, Father. Bear with me for a while. Right now, I just have to reveal the way I've been treated in this manor, and how rotten these guys have been since I was a kid." Sophia consoled herself at that moment. When her grandfather listened to her carefully, he decided to ask her the reason why the little girl had raised her hand against her brother. "I hit Vel because he told me I wasn't Rom," justified the girl. Sophia's mother, after all, had never been able to get permission for the last name Rom, so the natural wasn't going to deny it. "Yes, I'm not full-fledged, but even though I'm not, I'm definitely a Rom. The Rom that Grandpa recognized," the child declared. In her past life, actually running the clan, Sophia had painfully realized that the fact that she existed didn't mean she wasn't complete at all. She was 100 times more suited to the surname than the idiots who only boasted of wearing it. Sophia had definitely realized that she was Rom no less than the others. So you didn't hit him because he called you a critter, but because he said you weren't a Rom. Her grandfather decided to ask her then, and that question was exactly the right one, exactly what the little girl was trying to convey to all the adults. The man also noticed that even though the little girl had hurt her knees, she wasn't crying at all. And he had heard that she was such a crier. "I'll cry after I say everything I want to say. I'll go to my room and cry there," Sophia then said suddenly. The girl's father intervened in the conversation. "I'm sorry, Daddy. I think we need to take care of Fia's wound," said the man. Therefore, the grandfather easily let them go. But then, the girl still asked to stay there for one more minute. She quickly went to the other end of the room to get her book. The girl also admitted that she had mistreated the story, so she decided to apologize. "I treated her badly. A book is for gaining knowledge, not for beating Luoi hurting," Petty also added. She explained that she believes without hesitation that when one realizes one's guilt, it is important to admit it quickly. This pleased her grandfather even more and clarified that now it was indeed possible to disperse already. But then the disgruntled father of the protagonist's brother didn't stay silent either. "Just a second, Dad. Will you just close your eyes? Sophia did this to Vel, the eldest grandchild of the clan. She should be punished accordingly to her crime," Sassy Vin thought. Well, really, he shouldn't have said that. After all, his grandfather might have thought that the man had decided to challenge the decision of the most important member of their family. Vin really was a cretin who had no sense of atmosphere at all. "I'll put a stop to this. Knock it off and go to your room," said grandfather, and slammed the door as he walked back into his office. Sophia's father bowed and explained that it was her father's will. So that was the end of it. But that wasn't all the boy had to say. "Ah, yes, Vin! Don't you take childish pranks too seriously?" His brother taught him an even bigger lesson. The loving father had taken his daughter to their healer as soon as they found out the cause of the children's conflict. If everything had gone on as in her previous life, the girl would have gotten a scar on that spot at the age of 8. But still, she didn't break anything. And yet, the little girl was hurting elsewhere. When Vel pushed her, she fell to the floor wrong. A big adult pushes a small child with all his might. But what can you take from a low and petty person? Judging from the degree of swelling, it's not broken, but it's better to be careful for a while. I'll give you some special ointment. I'll let the doctor know then. Thank you, Dr. I want to have a word with my daughter. Could you please come out? Sophia's father asked him then. Yes, I will be in the lab. Call me if you need anything, informed the man and left the office. Once the girl was alone with her daddy, the man immediately asked why the little girl didn't tell him that her brothers were tormenting her. Ah, the troubled look in Daddy's eyes. The same color as mine. The little girl thought to herself then, as she looked her father straight in the eyes. At that, the little one said that her brothers said they would hit her more often if she spoke up. How much the father of the main character disliked this behavior of the little bullies. The man really wanted to teach these guys a lesson. Aye, those boys! He was angry, but the girl explained to her dad that nothing terrible had happened. She knew that today she had beaten one of the boys badly, so he wouldn't say that again. She had put up with it until now, after all, but she wouldn't do it again. I'll hit them back. And if they don't understand that, I'll run crying to the adults. So don't worry so much. I'm fine, Father, his little girl also said. Dad was only happy to praise such courage of his daughter. He also reminded the little girl to not call him father, but just Daddy. Then the reborn remembered that she had actually called him that at that age. So much water had passed that she had completely forgotten. Daddy! We'll definitely live happily ever after together! She also agreed with her father. And Dad hardly understood the meaning of her words then. He would never understand. The girl's goal was that this time he would not die so ridiculously. Sophia could protect her father and the Rom family. The first thing she needed to do was to open her grandfather's eyes and get his confession. As pathetic a fool as he is, Vin is the eldest son of the head of the family. For that reason alone, both inside and outside the house, a lot of people practically already perceive him as the head. And Lawrence is already sticking it to him. A father only needs books to be happy. Meanwhile, Sophia has 3 peaks to climb. Like a sometimes non-existent third son, incomplete daughter. Add to all this that the protagonist is now also very young. Grandfather in his previous life could not entrust the duties of the head of the family to any of his children. He pulled everything on himself to the last. That's why he fell ill. Now, Sophia needed to demonstrate her skills to her grandfather as soon as possible so that it wouldn't happen again. But the problem was that Sophia was a bastard child, and a girl at that. Those weaknesses won't go anywhere even after she becomes the successor. At times, they will definitely bind the girl by her arms and legs, but that can be easily compensated for by the crown prince's patronage. Therefore, even if not for the sake of saving the clan, she should definitely attract the attention of the second prince, preferably to help him build up his influence and gain the trust of those around him so that he can get the title of crown prince even easier than he once did. If she succeeds, the future emperor won't turn his back on the House of Rom, who had helped him for a long time. They would definitely be able to get along well. Ah, that's right. Around this time, the second prince's mother should pass away. That was when the protagonist aptly recalled. It was said that she passed away on one of the days of this year's rainy season. She couldn't even get a doctor because of the Empress. That's how miserably she died. However, Sophia also heard that the second prince put the Empress through the same thing when he became crowned. What cure is there when you're locked in a cold palace? She couldn't even recognize the name of her illness. Based on that, the prince's temperament is also unconventional. Well, in any case, this boy should be alone 24 hours a day now. If it were up to the girl, she would have gone to him right away. But for young Rom children, leaving the estate is restricted to 11 years old. But that didn't mean it wasn't possible at all. The only exception to the rule was the permission of the head of the family. So it was possible to wait a little while. Sophia thought to increase her authority in the manor, and then she would rush to the prince right away. In the meantime, a guest unbeknownst to him entered the room of the girl's father. "Excuse me, but can I come in for a bit?" asked Lara. "Mr. Lara, what are you doing here? Did your father ask you to deliver something urgently?" Then decided to ask Garrick's son. Lara was his grandfather's right-hand man. He would soon be keeping track of the family's trade groups. But on this day, it was not known what brought such a personage here. Then the gentleman revealed that he had come to see a little girl, Sophia. That night, Garrick called the gentleman to him. The grandfather told him that his granddaughter had taken a special book to read. The man wondered what his assistant thought about it. "I think surely there wasn't some misunderstanding," the man decided to inquire. Still, the fellow had his doubts, for Men of the South was a specialized manual for accurate research. It's not the kind of book Miss Sophia would read. I mean, she's not even 10 years old. She probably just liked the cover, didn't she? The cover is a deep green color. There's a good chance she accidentally mistook the book for a collection of fairy tales. The guest put forward his theory, but Garrick explained that it was unlikely. It could be like that with an ordinary child, but not with Sophia. And the man had summoned his partner precisely so that he could personally check whether the girl was gifted or not. Henceforth, Sophia will also be trained like the other children, the head of the clan then stated. Lara was not thrilled with such a statement. "Master, I'll repeat myself, but Miss Sophia is very small. It's hard for children at that age to even just sit still for long." The aide tried to get his point across. Still, it was obvious what the king was trying to get across to his right-hand man. Sophia might have been a particularly intelligent child. The man revealed that the girl's mother had been a nomad. She was incredibly beautiful, but that was the only thing she stood out for. I won't hide the fact that I wasn't particularly interested in her daughter because of that either. But today it seemed to me that she was the one who could properly inherit the blood of my kind. Garrick shared, though the co-worker in front of him still continued to think it was impossible. Lara, on the other hand, was certain that no matter how you looked at it, it was just a normal little kid. Back to the present, the Emperor's aide walked into his father's room. "Hello, ma'am. My name is Lara. I'm not the most competent, but I am the instructor of the young lords of Ram." The teacher introduced himself. The boy himself at that moment thought that the master must have just made a mistake. The other day, they had arranged with Garrick to have Lara conduct a sort of exam to find out the exact level. If the results don't meet expectations, you can't force me to put her down for classes, even through an order. This is for the sake of preserving the learning atmosphere. Please understand me," asked the educator that day. "It's nice to meet you, Mr. Lara. My name is Sophia Ram." The little girl also said hello. Even that already made the gentleman freeze in place with amazement. The child showed a perfect curtsy. This was already admirable. Of course, the protagonist knew she had done well. After all, she was learning from the instruction and had watched the lessons for Ram's young successors. Ram lessons sounds like a simple system of homeschooling, but in reality, it's the first step in cold-bloodedly getting a grade. First of all, regardless of age, only children who are ready for lessons are eligible to participate. Because of this, depending on the age of readiness for these lessons, the level of the kids is determined. Plus, the age of completion of the lessons is also undetermined. Being notified that one could no longer attend lessons sometimes meant taking away that right. Last, the grade received in each lesson is immediately reported to the head of the clan. The head of the clan is the best of the best. He scrutinizes everything the children say and do. However, in her previous life, Sophia was only able to get to these lessons when she was 9 years old, so the girl didn't understand why things were happening so early now. "If you don't mind, I'd like to ask you a couple questions. Answer them calmly." The teacher informed then, and the girl calmly agreed. Of course, Lara decided to start with questions about the book. "All right then, this book you're holding in your hands right now. I heard you personally borrowed it." The one began to speak. The girl immediately remembered that her grandfather had paid attention to this book that very evening. Well, actually, that was what Sophia wanted. And since everything happened like that, now she really has a special chance. So, the protagonist admitted that she had been reading it since yesterday. Then Lara decided to ask what the plot of this narrative was about. "I haven't read much yet, but it says that there are some amazing people living in a forest in the south of the empire in groups. This book is about them," shared the little girl. She also shared that it was written by the author Roe. She saw that on the cover. Then, the teacher also asked her to tell what the first chapter was about, which the girl had no problem doing. A man named Roe talked about how rumors of people from the south had reached him. The little preschooler answered calmly. It was obvious that Lara was very surprised. It was written all over his face. He probably thought the girl was carrying that book around like a toy. "I understand. This book has a lot of boring stuff in it even for the average adult," thought the girl. "Did you come because you wanted to read it? Shall I lend it to you? I'm curious what happens next, but I can read it later," then decided to say the girl. Now Lara also decided to go over the plot of the story. He started to state that there were 3 rumors that Roe had heard, but immediately, Sophia politely interrupted the professor. "Wait a minute, Teacher Feely. You've made a mistake. Roe is not a he, but a she. It's written in the preface. The full name is Ava Roe," corrected the little girl. The book was really from the story of a female scientist. Lara was so thoroughly surprised that he now had to borrow the book briefly from the child to scrutinize it again. He had thought that such a famous research book had been published by a man. The teacher told him that he had read the whole thing, and it turned out that he had read it superficially. Considering that there is no way a young child can understand specialized literature, I fell victim to prejudice. At this point, Lara had no more questions. Now, the professor was finally convinced that the girl could attend classes from next Saturday. But at the same time, the teacher still decided to warn the little girl that at first it would be difficult for her to keep up with the lessons because she joined the already actively engaged group. Although this fact did not upset the little girl at all. "I'm going to learn a lot of new things. It seems like it will be interesting." Positive was her attitude. "Well, with your permission, I'll be off. I'll see you in class," said the professor as Daddy praised his favorite little girl. As soon as Lara got to his room, he immediately started thinking about the girl he had recently met. The place of being in charge of training is not shining with prospects. I was just about to think of quitting this position. Maybe I should stay a little longer, thought the professor, who was so much inspired by the abilities of the little 7-year-old girl. It was clear to him now that it would be a pleasure to teach this child. The next day, Papa suggested that Sophia go on a picnic. "Let's go on a picnic. It's been a long time since we've gone to one, and the weather is great," said her father, holding a basket with all sorts of goodies. He took many of Sophia's favorite cakes and cookies. So, he suggested his favorite girl to read a book together under the sun. "Oh yeah, since we're going out, shall we stop by Dr. Oma for a bit? We'll thank him for fixing our Fia's wound at the same time," Father added unobtrusively. Since the child's body contained an experienced adult girl, she was well aware that this was his way of taking the bait, afraid that the girl wouldn't want to go to the hospital. This was her daddy, and he is that sweet. The girl said that's exactly what she was thinking, which made the man even happier. Eventually, they went together to see the gentleman. "Hello, Dr. We're not interrupting you much?" said Ruslan hello. Before Ram in his arms with the baby came into their room, the doctor was talking to some girl. "I have free time. I was just giving advice to my student," said the man. Just then, it was a good opportunity to introduce the girl to the visitors of the hospital room. "By the way, it's worth introducing her to you, since this is the case. This is my apprentice, Esther," said the doctor, and the girl bowed. "Daddy, I want to be treated by this little sister." Then the little girl started to get cranky. Her father explained to her that the doctor was in the room, but the girl continued to be stubborn. She claimed that she really liked this little sister. "I'm going to be treated by my little sister," the persistent girl continued to say. "Apparently, she has a deep fondness for the mistress. This girl is very capable, so you don't have to worry, Mr. Ruslan, and I'll keep an eye on her as well. Do you mind, mistress?" the man decided to ask. This girl was indeed capable. She is a specialist who would later create a very important medicine. It was obvious that the little sister was nervous, because as soon as she started to look at the little girl, her hands shook very badly. Therefore, the girl decided to support the young trainee. "Sis said her name is Esther, right? Wow, that's a beautiful name. My name is Sophia, and my dad is Ruslan," shared the protagonist. The girl also began to ask what the nurse learns from the doctor. As it turned out, Esther is studying medical botany. In general, the atmosphere in the office was quite friendly. Esther liked the little girl, so the girl promised that she would come to the young girl again and again for an appointment. The nurse, having made her examination, noticed that the swelling had almost subsided. It was therefore possible to change the medicine. The doctor said to bring in an extract of the herb sac. The girl returned with what the little girl thought was a very scary-looking vial with a green liquid inside. "Okay, mistress, you just need to drink this. Any remaining tumor will immediately disappear," Esther informed. To allay the child's fears a bit, Daddy decided to offer Sophia her favorite chocolate chip cookies after she drank this. With nothing left to do, the protagonist had no choice but to whip them out. The girl decided to close her eyes and swallow them all at once. The taste was terrible, but the doctor and her sister cured her. Now the little girl got her cherished cookies, but she didn't want to eat them anymore, so she had to give some to Dr. And Nurse Esther. After that, the daddy took his daughter in his arms and they had to go. The meeting with Esther exceeded all of Sophia's expectations. Next time, the girl decided to point her out too. This way, they could get closer. On the way to the picnic, the protagonist also remembered that around this time, something happened at the estate. It was quite a vivid memory. At this time, Garak was already sitting with his right-hand man Lara to share his impressions about the baby. "Now, I understand what you meant, Master," the professor admitted then. "And that's it? Emda, what was before and what is now? Your assessment is so stingy," whereupon the man said disappointedly. But that wasn't the case at all. Lara still had a lot more to say. "To be honest, after finishing the exam, I probed the servants in Mr. Ruslan's entourage a bit, but no one noticed Madam's genius. When I stated that he had concealed Madam's right to participate in the class, Mr. Ruslan's reaction started with a completely unexpected shock," shared the educator. "I'm assuming that Mistress might have been hiding her ability all this time," the king's aide then stated. Though it was the professor's assumption, it was quite appropriate. Honestly, it's clear to anyone that Ruslan lacks both influence and ability. Is the environment so bad that a little girl had to hide her skills? Was surprised by her grandfather. Still, Lyra reminded Gary that they still had plenty of time. There was no rush for the man. It was okay to observe first. So, after a while, Lyra was going to have to personally reprimand his master on his granddaughter's results. But that's when their conversation was interrupted by a man who entered his father's office. It was Mr. Wynne. The Duke told him that the people from Du's trade group had arrived. "So, you're going to sell textiles in the capital that are only traded in the eastern region? Currently, the Du trade group can't fully take over such trading activities, so it's asking Rom to arrange transportation?" Garak decided to clarify, and his son's partner confirmed it. Aside from the fact that the man was going to borrow the payment for these textiles from Rom's bank, he would also like to ask the professor for a sum with a reserve. "You don't have to worry about repaying the debt. I am the head of the Du Trading Group, Croy Angel. I swear on the name of my family that I won't cheat your trust," the man also added. But this clan definitely didn't inspire confidence in Lara. Angel, even if it's the Empress's clan, there must be a limit to insolence. Who would dare to shake money from a debtor when they come from the imperial family? In other words, the Rom will be responsible for the money and hassle, and they will only reap the benefits. The educator analyzed everything. Then, in the case of the right of enterprise, the consequences for that, too, will be borne by the Rom's gender. The landlord cannot accept such a terrible offer. Therefore, the man decided to entrust the matter to his son, Duke Vin. He asked him to do his best to succeed. "Yes, you can trust me, father! Mr. Croy, come! Let us discuss the details in my waiting room." Vin rejoiced then. But Lara wasn't about to let it all go that easily. To begin with, the man suggested to initially look at the goods, and then they could already discuss everything. Everything must be done in sequence. You can't agree on anything without knowing the goods you have to work with. But the Rom family heir himself didn't even pay attention to such words of the professor. He was still heading towards the exit together with his partner. "It's just our employee. Don't mind Mr. Angel," said Vin. Vin, on the contrary, got even more angry. He also decided to put the professor in his place. "And you're just a simple assistant. How dare you interfere? Leave now!" shouted the man. The man believed that this venture would be a success, and the Angel bloodline continued to personally Vin. "I don't care how much money it will bring in. Money always goes hand in hand with power. This debt will be my golden living. I will be on the same level as the imperial family." Then thought the unpleasant type. As the son was about to leave, Garak thought about the fact that the mission of inspecting the goods was quite doable. In the end, the guy had to make arrangements for it with the head of the trade group. "I've just prepared some copies and left some textiles in the capital's warehouse. I'll bring them to you another day," Mr. Croy informed. Because of which, Vin had to apologize to his investor again, as it could provide an inconvenience. "No, it's fine. It is the wish of the head of the Rom clan. I am able to fulfill his will," replied the colleague. "But how long are you going to lick the boots of the person who came to borrow money and resources from you? It seems that only the professor was thinking about such an unpleasant son of the master." Master, this isn't even close to a deal. Reconsider. Chanel would never have offered such a stupid proposal, spoke up Lara. It is, but think carefully. Is the game definitely not worth the candle? Said Garrick. And it was a challenge. One child is always overreacting, another doesn't care about anything, and the third is too weak-willed to do anything about it. Of all of them, Chanel was the best candidate. But the father didn't trust her husband. Chanel is doing well, so Garrick only looked after her. This is the basic principle. The head of the family does not interfere in the battle of the heirs. This allows for the greatest objectivity. And since that's the case, Garrick should at least support the offspring who is at least trying to do something. Now another trial could be held, this time for Angel and Vin. Didn't you just recently have high hopes for Mistress Sophia? It was then that the assistant intervened in the master's reasoning. Garrick thought she was undoubtedly intelligent, but after all, they still know too little about her innate abilities. Plus, she is extremely young, so all they can do is wait. This child's probation has barely begun. At this time, the little girl herself was about to go to class. She needed to go into the room where the other children were waiting for class to start. Vel and Myron and Kirill and Larissa were there. What a big surprise the boys were when they saw such a little girl in the room. Sophia had to inform them that from today she would also be studying. Of course, Vel didn't believe at once that the little girl had come to study. Lies! You say they let you into the same class as I attend? Lies, liar! As someone like you, shouted the ill-mannered child. The girl knew there was no point in wasting her nerves on this stupid child, but that's when the twins approached her. They immediately began to push the little boor, Vel, aside, to which she was surprised enough. In her previous life, Cyril and Myron had been different. They didn't care about her from a high place. And now, the kids were starting to ask her if it was true that she'd gotten into a fight with Duke Vin's son. Maybe the kids thought she was kind of cool about it. Well, that's when the professor walked into the room. Class was starting. Good thing the class started without any problems. But Sophia was still plagued by a question. For some reason, the twins were glued to her sides. Cyril and Myron are Aunt Chanel's twins. In her previous life, these two were not that they weren't interested in Sophia. They didn't even pay attention to her once. No, they didn't. When Sophia had been beaten up by Vel and Aslan, they hadn't even cast a glance at her, completely ignoring her and looking right through her fingers. That was definitely the way things were. Why are they acting like this all of a sudden? I feel wildly uncomfortable. Didn't understand the protagonist. She had to listen carefully to the lesson. Lara informed that today they would be learning the basic concept of business. Well, otherwise, it wasn't that much different from the expectations of the reborn. Vel was dozing quietly to himself on the bed. Every time the boy acted ignorant, Sophia thought he was listening in the wrong place in Rom's lessons. But she hadn't even expected that to be so true. Except it was strange that the teacher definitely hears everything perfectly well, but yet for some reason, he doesn't punish him. Lara doesn't even try to wake him up. When the professor turned back and saw the behavior of all the children, he only chuckled quietly. He doesn't give any punishments, doesn't try to keep discipline, and doesn't try to interest them in anything. But after the lesson, he will report everything to the head of the clan. All right, since that's the case, I need to prove myself. Teacher, know that I am listening to you very hard and attentively, thought the little girl at that moment. A couple hours later, the lesson was already over. But then the professor announced that today he would give a special homework assignment. The deadline was before next week's lesson, and the topic of the assignment was an ordinary log. Lara said that it was strong and sprouted quickly. This tree of life is lightweight and widespread on the continent. Your assignment: sell this log and get paid for it. Sell it any way you want. You can chop it or stab it. You can burn it if you have to. It doesn't matter, the educator explained. But the man also pointed out that only one thing was forbidden: to use their status to force a purchase. The condition was to sell that tree only to the person who needed it. And it was evident that this upset the twins at the very least. It was immediately clear how they planned to proceed. It was then that the teacher told them that this log was not one for everyone, but only a specimen. The logs for their assignment had already been delivered to the children's rooms. The children had already begun to think through what they would do with it, but it was obvious how much Vel didn't want to do it, however. He didn't hide it. Why should I do something like this? A job where you personally touch money is vulgar. Some sort of selling a thing can be entrusted to those below you, informed the noxious lad. Saral had seriously indoctrinated him with the noble model of thinking. Dependence on money is unfavorable for a nobleman. That model is yesterday's model. Today, even if you're an aristocrat, you can't achieve anything without it. Moreover, even these same angels didn't create the Do Trade group themselves. But Vel and his mother still say such utopian things. In that case, there was nothing to be done. The teacher informed that the boy would have to give the unsatisfactory for this assignment. Although the boy did not like it, but there was no other choice. The current assignment was to sell the item and get paid. And the boy said he wouldn't do it. Hence, his grade is unsatisfactory. Then change the assignment! The problem from the beginning is that it is ridiculous! Then the aristocrat's son started to get indignant. Whoever can get the money for selling the tree and earns the highest amount will receive a separate reward from me. Try your best, the pro-professor also announced. It was obvious how rude this boy was. Even the other kids didn't understand what good he could ever do. But it wasn't about him right now. They needed to focus on the assignment. Although the task sounded simple, but if you think about it, it's not so easy. The log itself won't fetch more than a couple of kopecks. Therefore, something must be made of it to raise its value. Something that can be wooden, something that will be in demand. From crude utensils and toy furniture to a carved frame. At the same time, there should not be a lot of effort put into it. But the cost of production is directly related to the cost of the wood itself. There are many places in life where wood is used, but it is an inexpensive and not rare material. And Sophia didn't think anything of woodworking. And if you use someone else's help, the helper will also need to be paid. If everything goes wrong, the cost of the goods would be higher than their selling price. Thus, Sophia will not only not earn money, but will suffer only one loss. Therefore, the girl seriously thought about what she should do and what is better to do. But then a great idea came into her head. She informed the teacher that she would try very hard on her homework and ran out of the classroom. Judging by her excitement, she's already found a solution. Makes me anticipate the next class. Thought that moment to the educator. The girl knew that the person who would be able to offer the best price was the one in Rom right now. Without hesitation, she immediately ran to her daddy. That's when she found out that daddy wasn't busy right now. No, not at all. If you need something, it's more important than anything else to do. Her dad said then, Honestly, I have a request. Can you draw me something? Sweetly inquired the little girl. When she asked him to draw her grandmother, he told her that they had tons of portraits in their house that her father could show her. But the little girl refused. Ugh, in those portraits, and the clothes are too luxurious. The grandmother's face is too stern, she explained, and the child wants to see a peacefully smiling grandmother after all. Grandma is Daddy's mom. I want to see her as you remember her. The little one kept urging him on. Of course, the man simply could not refuse his daughter, so he did try to help the child. My mother, let's see. The last time I saw her was a very long time ago, so I don't remember well. But she was a sensitive person, he said. Within a couple minutes, the portrait of my grandmother was ready. Even though his father wasn't sure if he did a good job, the woman in the drawing looked very similar. It was the beautiful Grandma Sophia. The little girl thanked her father for the drawing and told him that she was going to go play outside for a while. On the way, as she ran down the path, she accidentally fell down with the drawing. Moreover, the dad had told the child a few minutes before to be careful and not to run too fast. Surely my dad isn't psychic. In my previous life, I stumbled, and then I fell into the valley of death. I really better be careful. The young lady thought at that moment. Well, the girl was already there. Behind the Ram Manor is a village where hired masters live. Unlike the servants who permanently reside in the manor and are given rooms, they live further away and are in charge of producing customized items for Ram. Simply put, this is a village created by Ram for her craftsmen and their families. However, the girl didn't yet know where the right person might be. She even thought she would have to ask every person she met about it. When she turned her attention to her hand, she noticed that she had scratched herself. The girl realized that she needed to wash her hands first. If it got more serious early on, her daddy would worry. So she decided to go find the well. When she found it, she saw that it was quite deep. She realized that she couldn't lift the bucket of water herself, as the baby was too weak. So she decided to bend down and figure something out. Well, as soon as she looked down, she was intercepted by some man. "Who the hell are you? Didn't your parents teach you not to play near the well?" he asked, and took her by the armpits. When the girl turned around, she saw Alfaro John in front of her. He was a genius sculptor whose talent was recognized quite late, in his 30s. He was extremely grateful to Ram, who, albeit belatedly, recognized his, a simple carpenter, abilities. And, as a sculptor, he dedicated his first creation to their family. It was the work World Tree. How much people marveled when they saw this sculpture. It was so artificial and so big, a meticulous creation indeed. And this kind of genius was only noticeable in his 30s. Using dozens of trees skillfully, he had created a masterpiece of masterpieces, the embodiment of the crest of the World Tree, the symbol of Ram. With this one piece, he became instantly famous throughout the empire, and now it was so easy for the girl to find it. As he pulled the child out of the well, he had advised her not to mess around too much and to play something safer. Now that he got a closer look at her face, he noticed that her hair and skin were clean, and from head to toe, she was dressed elegantly and expensively. It was then that he immediately realized that an aristocratic child stood before her. Immediately, the man began to apologize to the lady, but the girl held out her hand to him, showing him with a palm gesture to stop talking like that. "There is no need to apologize. It was indeed my mistake. More importantly, you saved me." It was then that she decided to get closer to the point. The girl decided to ask if it was true that he was good at making sculptures, but the guy immediately started to get whimsical. All I do is carve children's toys out of wood and sell them. I'm not that good at that," said he. But the clever little girl pointed out that since he was getting paid for his creations, that meant he was already a master. And after all, his works of art are well worth the money. So the protagonist said she had a favor to ask of him. "Could you make a bust from the picture?" Unexpectedly, but politely, she asked at that moment. At that moment, the guy had to admit that he still had a hard time with people's faces. This upset the babe a little. She thought that he really might not have gotten to that hard level yet, after all. But to her delight, Alfaro told her that of course he had made busts of his family members once before. However, that wasn't all there was to it. Sophia was beginning to worry that it would take a long time, and the teacher had given them a little over a week. If the sculptor couldn't do it in that time, she would have to think of something else. And that's when the boy got the kid even more excited. Tomorrow is just the weekend, so I should be able to do it in 4 days." He somehow seemed to have heard Sophia's thoughts and was now reassuring her even more. The girl decided that she needed to give him a quick errand and leave before he said anything else. So Sophia handed him a piece of paper and ordered him to work from that drawing. "I'm counting on you very much. This is a gift. I will pay you well for your labors," she also added. But the boy started to deny, saying that he didn't need any payment. "No! You have honed your skills so diligently, Alfaro. Any labor must be paid for. I am a Ram. Ram proudly follow the principles of a fair deal. Therefore, accept payment, sculptor. It is your right." The stubborn girl stated clearly, "Okay, now one last thing. I mean that log you need to use. Will you be able to pick it up? It's too heavy. I can't carry it. Also for last, the little girl said. When the girl returned to her house, she was immediately met by her brothers Kirill and Myron. The guys began to beg her to play hide and seek with them. Even when she said she was busy, the children didn't believe her. Lies! You're not busy at all! You only read books every day! Fia is bad! The children began to persuade her. I am really busy right now. Later, when I'm more free, I'll be sure to play with you. I had to promise the main character. At this point, the kids left, but the girl knew they would still come back tomorrow. She thought back to the past 3-day struggle. On the street, they swooped in, spotting 30 meters away, pestering every day during meals, pouncing with requests to play anytime and anywhere, and so on. And the girl really thought it was strange. For some reason, guys so often came to her specifically. In my past life, they didn't easily care about me. After Aunt Chanel's divorce, they stayed with my father, and once they rebuilt Shoe Castle, they acted as if they had nothing to do with Rom. By the way, and Aunt Chanel, why did she divorce Beslin Shoe in the first place? The girl also wondered. He was madly in love with his aunt, after all. He even gave up his castle for her, and that's when, from her ponderings, she was distracted by her father, who joyfully entered the room. Fia, look! Dad finally finished his new book, Ruslan announced. He personally wrote the book himself, and was sure that the little girl would definitely like it. Therefore, Dad suggested reading it together. Previously, Dad had already written dozens of books. He dropped out of the academy and did not really engage in educational activities. In the end, everything was limited to writing 1-volume works, which then went to dust in the bookcases of the manor. But he always looked happy, no matter what the end result was. What did he write about? Literally about his love for his daughter. I look forward to the day I get to choose a dress for the debutante ball for Fia, my much-loved daughter. The protagonist read. He thought to finish this book by the time Sophia starts wearing adult dresses. The book does not glitter with depth of text, but with its help, the little girl could learn what styles were popular in the Rambo Empire from generation to generation. Fashion, after all, tends to come back. Usually it's the mothers who do the dresses on debutantes, but Daddy will make the best of it. So don't worry about that, okay? He asked then. This literally moved the girl to tears. The reborn then, after all, never made it to the debutante ball. After her father's death, she had ceased to exist for everyone. No one even thought to send her an invitation. And she herself was fully concentrated on her duties. She had no time to debut in Soviet society. When she was able to achieve some position in the clan, the places that bound her to her father had long since been rearranged. And she had none of his books left on her hands. Perhaps in a past life he had written her one, dreaming of the day when he would personally pick out her dress. The girl immediately hugged her daddy and declared to him that he was obligated to pick out her dress afterward. Of course, the two of us will sit down, open this book wide, look through everything carefully together, and choose. Father had promised. Now Sophia wished that this time her beloved father would be sure to see his daughter's debutante ball. She wished that she, in the dress chosen by her father, took his hand and entered the ballroom. It was worth the change of fortune for that. While they were riding in the carriage, the girl decided to suggest to her papa that they take a walk in the garden. Her sudden desire to get out of the carriage before the right place they were going to, the girl explained by the fact that the weather outside is beautiful. The sun shines very brightly. But in reality, it was time to prepare a reliable support for Daddy. At this time, the master, along with his assistant and other sons, were looking at the fabric that Croy Angel had brought them to try out. Lara wondered what raw material this cloth was made from. The man told her that they were making the cloth from the long stalks of some horseradish plant. Angel explained that this raw material is traditionally used in the eastern regions of the empire. Vin, on the other hand, added that the head of the trade group had personally scouted everything about it. Why this pretense of being an expert in everything since you don't really know anything? Although it's a traditional raw material, but it's only used in the eastern regions. Not many people know about this material. A cheeky Vin also continued. But people love curiosities after all. The outlook for this venture is very positive, told the son to the king of the Ram clan. In reality, it was actually a foolish trading group unsuitable for trading things. This enterprise only aimed at bribing the Empress, an amateurish approach. But it was enough for the Empress. Vin was already trembling with anticipation. He truly believed that no matter how successful it was, it would help him get closer to the Empress. Except that if he failed, he would not only suffer losses, but also incur her wrath. And the man didn't seem to have thought of such consequences at all. At that moment, Sophia ran up to them. "Wow, I thought I heard Grandpa's voice, and it's really you. Daddy and I went out for a walk. I heard the teacher's voice, too," said the little girl, who came running unexpectedly to the adults. The girl immediately began to wonder what she saw in front of her. She marveled at how much of the same cloth there was. "My uncle and I are wondering if we can make money by selling this fabric," Grandpa Garrick told her then. Even though the child didn't give any sign, but in reality, the reborn girl who had traveled back to the years when she was a child knew very well that there was no way to make money from this. This enterprise is a complete failure. They don't even know anything about the features and benefits of the fabrics. Eventually, they will be forced to give up everything, too, as if they had nothing else to spend their money on. It took Ram a long time to make up for the losses she suffered and to be ridiculed by the merchants for a while. However, no one would listen to Sophia, the child, not even if she tells them about all the problematic aspects of the case. So someone else has to play the part. That's when the father joined the adults. As it turned out, the little girl had run far away from her dad, and only now was he able to catch up with her. "Daddy, Grandpa's gonna sell all this stuff!" loudly declared the little girl as soon as she saw her father. The man tried to calm his daughter down by imploring her that since the adults were talking now, they didn't need to be disturbed, so he began to suggest that she get out of here. "But, Daddy, look. They say it's made from horseradish grass. How can you make cloth out of grass? Amazing!" Then the girl showed him, and such a statement really astonished him. It alarmed the man, and he focused his attention on this material. It was the first time he had seen such a material, and the fabric itself was really rustling to the touch. Ruslan felt it when he touched it. At the same time, the man felt the scornful look of his brother Vin on his face. "Ah, sorry. It's just so interesting to see things I've only read about in books before. Sophia, let's go," Dad suggested, and the girl was already seriously scared. She knew that her plan just couldn't fall apart like this. Just then, Garrick's father intervened in the conversation. He asked Ruslan to elaborate on what he knew about it. I don't know much myself, Father. All I know is that horseradish has been used in certain regions of the Empire for about 100 years," narrated the man. "It is very easy to produce from this material, and it is very plentiful, so commoners are happy to purchase such cloth," said the man, but at the point Ruslan said about commoners, he was stopped by the vendor. Croy was very angry that Ruslan didn't understand the concept of someone who would use this cloth. "You say this kind of cloth is used by commoners." But the man continued to convince others that this was the case. After all, the fabric is coarse and rough, so it's not suitable for noblemen's outfits. "There's no such thing! The person who told me about this material said that both nobles and commoners were happy to wear clothes made of it. What's there to make money from commoners?" Partner Wynne continued to shout. Then the owner intervened in the conversation, for his son had blabbed to the man that the supplier had personally inquired about the cloth. This put Angel on edge. Kind of like this was handled by a very close acquaintance of mine, and I trust him like I trust myself, Croy continued to say. But it seemed that this acquaintance had tricked him. In fact, horseradish fabric has another disadvantage. Since the material is of plant origin, the cloth has a kind of shelf life. As expected, when Ruslan picked up some of the fabric, he noticed mold on it. I know that since the material is based on plant stems, it is very sensitive to moisture. And recently it was just the rainy season, so the fabric went bad. Then the Duke explained everything. One could imagine how offended Croy was. The man didn't even have any alternatives, only horseradish cloth. And that option was not lost. Horseradish is a common herb, so it can be found in the nearby territories as well. There will be no problems with the extraction of materials, Ruslan also said. Yes, I'm only guessing, but if you hope to make aristocrats your main customers, try adding flannel when creating fabric, the man also advised. To be honest, this material is really quite good. It is lightweight, breathable. That's a very big plus. And if you dilute it with flannel, you can significantly reduce the cost of goods, which is what the man advised to do. Spending a little extra money on it, you can save a lot later on the main material. At the same time, making the finished product softer and fresher. But even then, Professor Lara intervened in their conversation. The man told them that first of all, to work with flannel you need skillful craftsmen. One would have to look for a weaver with the right skills. Rum just has a weaver's guild. Craftsmen are plentiful there. However, in such a case, when adding a new cloth, the profit pressure will need to be reassessed based on the amount of contribution each party makes to the productions. Given the report of suitable craftsman Ram, I know how best. The men then had a nice business conversation about future profits. Okay, now I'm really going to go, father brother. Come on, Sophia, say goodbye to your grandfather and uncle. The man said then, and was about to really go. But Garak stopped Ruslan. The father stated that he would assign businesses for the boy as well. I think the head of the trade group needs a person more knowledgeable in this field. What do you think? Asked Garak to the supplier, and he, of course, agreed. Knowledge of the product is the most expensive, after all. You are so erudite. If you can help us, there will be nothing to fear. Even though I don't think much in this field, I too will try to help in any way I can for the sake of Ram, Mr. Garak, said Croy. That's when Sophia also realized that she could influence this decision of her daddy. After all, she can't miss such a big chance. So, the girl started to beg her father to agree. Now, they were able to sign a contract with Ruslan. And how horrified was Vin, who had originally suggested the idea. But it all went smoothly. Dad's knowledge will help neutralize the defects in the fabric, and it wouldn't interfere with the case. The Angel family will cooperate with the Ram family. Vin's position is the only reason everyone wants him, because of the eldest son's position. While Ruslan and Lawrence don't seem to exist to them. That's why Vin has attended all the receptions at the Imperial Palace on behalf of the Ram family so far. But Ram's heir is always elected in a fair competition. If this venture becomes very successful, the invitation from the Imperial family will come in Sophia's and her dad's names next time. And there's someone in the Imperial Palace she really needs to meet soon. The second prince. For a brief due. That's where the boy should be. In the evening of that day, the girl did head to where she had originally planned to go. She came to Alfaro's house to get her statue. He had already finished it, and had really tried hard. The main character decided to peek at the sculpture with one eye, and when she opened the blanket a bit, she had already fallen in love with the bust. Honestly, I was worried the whole time. Our family business is carpentry. I was constantly wondering if I was doing the right thing by spending my time sculpting. But while working on your commission, I realized I really enjoy it immensely. Alfaro shared his experiences. Now he's filling in for his father and working as a carpenter, but when he has a spare moment, he spends it sculpting. And maybe someday I can really be called a sculptor. Then said the young boy, not even realizing that this would be the case in the future. The young genius also shared that saying that his sculpture had value gave him strength. What a lot he went through in that life. Even though Alfaro worked as a carpenter in his sweat, he didn't rest on the weekends. He carved sculptures. He silently walked his own path and was able to shine brightly at the end of that hard road. The emperor personally bestowed upon him the name Jean, meaning beauty. So he disguised himself as Alfaro Jean. "Listen, Alfaro, you want to do sculpture on more than just weekends, don't you?" Then the little girl started a dialogue. She knew, after all, that if only he could, he would do it every day. Now he wouldn't have time to learn carpentry. The evergreen forest that one that Win had gotten rid of, was not just an imperial gift. He was a very important place to Grandpa. Grandmother hated the dreary sight of fallen leaves in the fall, and so she sincerely enjoyed walking together with Grandfather along the path of the evergreen forest. Even after she left him, Grandpa repeated their route every day. He continued to do so until his eyes became completely blurred and he was bedridden. As soon as the little girl thought about it, she immediately saw her beloved grandfather. She came into his office to show off her gift. As soon as she tore off the cloth, an incredibly beautiful sculpture appeared in front of him. Natalia was very much like it. The little girl told him that her daddy had drawn Grandma's portrait, and she had asked her friend for the sculpture. In the last years of his life, Grandpa lost his eyesight because he was deeply saddened by the fact that he couldn't even see Grandma's portraits. But now, even if his eyesight deteriorates, he can remember her image by touching the bust with his fingertips. As expected, Grandpa also immediately recognized the homework material. Garrick was actually very pleased with his favorite granddaughter's gift. "Yes, I have many happy memories of Natalia. Therefore, I am filled with happiness looking at this statue," confessed the man at that moment. "Then that's enough. If Grandpa is happy, then I am too," Sophia declared then. She knew she would have plenty more opportunities to prove herself in class. In fact, the purpose of the class was not to get grades. Grades alone would not advance one to the position of heir of the lineage. If Sophia received grades from her grandfather, it would not be considered trading at a loss for the grading system. The man knew that by the rules of etiquette, one could not simply accept such a wonderful gift, so he decided to ask the girl what she wanted for it. Only a complete profane would ask for money for homework right now. Sophia thought at that moment. "Then, grandfather, this sculpture was carved by a friend of mine. His name is Alfaro." The little girl began to narrate. The chance to be the link between a hidden genius and a grandfather who valued masters of his craft above all else. Sophia simply couldn't let it go. The next day, in class, Lyra started asking the kids about their homework results. Vel, as you might expect, did nothing, and the twins got some money for the firewood they'd given the servant. Then it was Larissa's turn. "This. I made charcoal out of it and sold it to the forge at the manor. I needed to give some money to the servants who helped me, so I only earned 15 coppers. The modest girl said, and the teacher was pleasantly surprised by it. He praised the young lady. "You have produced a special commodity and sold it where it is definitely in demand. Very sensible," said the educator, and it was indeed unexpected. Sophia had not thought that Larissa, usually always shy and silent girl, could come up with such a great idea. Now it was Sophia's turn. The girl pointed to her chest and said that the fee was there. Fia said that she had made a sculpture out of a log and presented it. The little girl admitted that the recipient was very pleased, so she gave her an emerald brooch in return. She also said that of course she had paid the man who had carved the sculpture a proper reward as well. Vel then decided to enter the conversation. He completely disbelieved what the little girl was saying. "Lies! Who would give such a piece of jewelry for some wooden sculpture? You just brought your uncle's brooch and are trying to fool everyone." The man began to shout out, but the girl calmly replied to him that the recipient of the sculpture is the grandfather. Oh, and the guy himself could personally ask it of him to make sure she was right. "Vel, remember how you said that I, a half-breed, was insignificant and useless? That I would end up living like my commoner mother until my tombstone? Keep thinking that. You'll be displaced by the object of your ridicule. How will you feel when everything you thought was rightfully yours is gradually taken away from you?" Thought the protagonist. After all, this was only the beginning. At this point, today's lesson came to an end. After the children began to disperse, Sophia decided to approach Larissa and express her admiration. Sophia was indeed pleasantly surprised that the girl had done so well. The teacher said all the right things. You acted according to the principles of the trade. You always read books, don't you? It looks like you're going to really enjoy learning, Larissa. Awesome! The protagonist kept praising her. Larissa was Vel's sister. In her previous life, with the Empress's handout, she was forced to marry an aristocrat who was much older than her when she came of age. But Larissa, who was then neglected by her own husband, ridiculed even by the servants, turned away by the family she trusted, began to wither, and in the end, alone, in a strange house, away from Rom, it was not long before she finally wilted and returned to the damp earth. A fragile girl, as if crying or babbling that she didn't want to leave Rom. That's how Sophia saw Larissa for the last time. Then the protagonist had thought her an overly refined and weak flower. But no. Larissa is far more reasonable than Vel and both twins. Do you mind socializing with me a little longer? This is only my second lesson, so I'd really appreciate it if you could help me get used to it. Sophia offered then, and held out her new friend's hand. Of course, the girl happily agreed. For the little girl herself, this was a good chance to nurture her into another good specialist for Rom, so Sophia decided not to let her die so senselessly again. At that time, a meeting with the person in charge of the Rom Bank was taking place in the master's office, and Ruslan was a little late for it. It was then that his brother asked what the man was usually so busy with, since he hadn't been seen lately. How should I put it? Doing work on behalf of my father, though it's hard to call it work. I'm just consulted sometimes. Ruslan confessed then, and this shocked his relatives even more. After all, the master himself had given him the commission. It was obvious that Lawrence was already jealous of his younger brother. All right, now that we're talking about it, I'll say, Ruslan, don't get too cocky because you've been entrusted with a serious matter once. You'll never be so lucky again, so enjoy it while you can, understand? The older brother in the family began to threaten him at that moment. Ruslan, on the other hand, began to defend himself by explaining that he was really sorry for the way things had turned out. I didn't even have such a thought. If you want, I'll at least give the job to my brother right now. He even offered. But that made Vin himself even angrier. Only the girl sitting next to him could calm them down. Father's about to be here. So are you going to continue to rage like a colt that's had its croup pulled down? Said Chanel. But Vin was so angry that everything inside of him was shrinking at the mere sight of the younger man. So he decided to leave the room. Right after that, Ruslan thanked his sister for helping him calm down the cocky guy, although the girl continued to think of him as a coward after all. You're capable of getting passionate even for some nonsense, but you drop everything and run away. You hide in your hollow tree without even trying to fight. My lady continued to speak. She only wanted to convey to Ruslan that he could not protect anything by hiding and running away. After all, she had heard that his little daughter was quite intelligent. But a cowardly deer can't give birth to a lion. And it really worried her whether Ruslan's weak-willedness would ruin the child. At this time, the children were in their room. Sophia had finally agreed to play hide-and-seek with the twins. Now it was her turn to look for Myron and Kirill. The girl decided that she would stay in the forest for a while and then go looking for them as the time came. But then she heard a strange rustling near her. There shouldn't have been any servants here at this hour, so she was very surprised. In a second, Sophia noticed a boy she didn't recognize. She thought it was a guest who had gotten lost. As she continued to watch him, she noticed that he took off his aristocratic hat and with a sharp movement of his hand threw it right on the floor. The girl decided to pretend that she didn't see anything. She had to look for the twins after all. But then, the stranger turned directly to her. "Hey, I'm going to give the lowly you a chance to do me a favor. Walk me out." The rude little boy mumbled at the same time.